Hi, and welcome back to another Who Is series with, today we have special guest Brian Knight, the owner and founder of Pragmatic Works. Thank you, Brian, for joining us.
Thank you, Devin.
For joining us for these interviews. I think everyone's getting great feedback about these. They love hearing from people, and so I have a special interview with Brian today. Brian, you, of course, started the company.
I did, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about some of the early days and the beginnings of the company, and there's obviously some fun stories there, but tell us about that.
There were some pretty humble days early on. Yeah. So our first office, I remember the stress I felt of hiring our first employee, who was actually Mike Davis, still an employee.
Yeah.
And I remember it was Mike, myself, and Kim Steinhauer, who you've seen in an HR interview. And we were in this little office the size of not much bigger than this closet we're in right now.
Film room,
excuse me, film studio. Yeah. Anyways, we were in this office, and we were trying to get people to do a product demo for us, and at the same time we're doing a little consulting as well. There's only 4 of us in the whole company, and we had to schedule our demos around this office that was next to us, which happened to be a dog groomer. So every morning at like 10 o'clock in the morning, and between 8 and 10, the dogs would just flip out while their new dogs being brought in and all that. And the customers be on the phone like, what is going on? And so we had to mute and talk, and eventually kind of worked our way around it. It also had some other interesting scenarios at the office, like, they had wires that were coming down from the drop ceiling, and when a contractor put his foot through it, that was constructing next door. We had a bathroom at the end of the hallway with an AC right next to the bathroom, so when the door opened up,
all the air down
it blew all the air and all the goodness of the bathroom down the hall. So we had all sorts of interesting things that happened in our first office, and we every year we grew about 100% or so, and every year we moved into a new office and expanded until we were about to move in May. So.
Very nice. So you mentioned scheduling around demos. So what did the company started off as a software company, right?
It did, yeah.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about that.
So the way we funded ourselves is we were trying to build this software, in this case, to convert DTS packages to SIS, which is a big problem back then, not so much a problem now. It's still a little bit out there.
Right.
The way we funded it was we did consulting. So X% of our consulting dollar would go to funding the software. And we grew, we do a demo, we realized, there's a bug, you'd be doing the demo, and halfway the demo, you're like, is it going to work? Is it going to work? And you hit the go button. And then the developer would fix the problem, and the next day it'd be a little more stable, until finally, about 6 months later, every product takes about 6 months to build, we found out, we were pretty stable at that point.
Oh, very cool. So I'd like to tailor, and maybe we'll do multiple interviews with you, but I'd like to tailor this interview more towards talking about actually having a startup, beginning a startup. What are some of the challenges with beginning a new company, beginning a startup?
The biggest challenge is funding, really. Okay. It's really around how am I going to pay the employee. I remember when I first hired Mike, the heartache I had around paying for Mike.
Yeah.
And knowing that I didn't take a paycheck for the first 4 months of starting a company, 6 months of starting a company. So I had enough savings, thank goodness, to kind of weather the storm, but barely enough.
Yeah.
And it was a very hard time on the home front that time. And likewise, my other partners had the same problem. So really early on, the hardest thing about starting a company is making payroll, is going through and knowing that you're the last in line to get food when it comes to that. So you got to make sure everybody's paid, and the minute that they miss a paycheck is the minute the company folds the doors, really, because you are your employees.
Right.
And especially if you're a consulting company.
Right.
So if you're a consulting company that doesn't have employees that are paid, they're going to walk out the door pretty fast.
Sure. So speaking of funding, how have you seen, whether it's yourself or whether others doing startups, how do companies actually get startup funding, like actually to start the company themselves?
Yeah, so it depends on what kind of company it is. If you're looking at a business-to-consumer model where you're trying to build an app or build a game, build something like that, then really Kickstarter is a great option nowadays.
Okay, yeah.
Because if you go out and get funding, I think you see out in Silicon Valley, we don't live in Silicon Valley, but if you live in Silicon Valley, you might be able to get angel funding for a concept that doesn't actually exist. That doesn't exist outside of those, maybe Cambridge, maybe Silicon Valley, but when you get outside that, the real world doesn't operate that way. The real world wants you to get venture capital when you're ready to scale to the next level.
Okay.
And our private equity money when you want ready to scale to the next level. So to start off, you need angel money.
Okay.
So you either need to find a whole bunch of investors want to give you $10,000, $50,000, whatever it might be, or your own money, whatever you do, don't take money from the family, because every single holiday you're going to be feeling that pain. I had a partner who took a loan from me, and then before you know it, it created a weird situation.
I'm sorry about that. I shouldn't have done that.
No. It wasn't a family member in that case, but it creates weird situations. So you want to avoid, if you can, avoid using family for funds. But if I was to do a business to consumer application, probably Kickstarter would make a great option, because then you're able to kind of scale that, and if you have a great idea and you feel it's a great idea in your heart, you can really scale that pretty well.
And you're really passionate. You're kind of serving as almost an angel funding person yourself. You're really passionate about startups.
I am. It's really fun. I love mentoring new startups because it's a little bit my ADHD going on. The best thing about startups, you cannot get bored, right? Even in the company, even we're almost 9 years in Pragmatic Works, and I can't get bored here. There's so much going on, and it's constantly the product development is constantly changing. Right. So there's lots to do. Well,
you brought up partners a few moments ago, and partners as part of a company. How do you go through the process of actually choosing a partner? And then probably the follow-up is, all right, well, I thought I chose a good partner, and it's not. How do I cleanly break that partnership if I need to?
Yeah, so the best way is using introductions. Go to some startup groups, some meetup groups that are all about entrepreneurism, and you'll meet somebody in college, you'll meet somebody, a friend of yours, be careful. If you meet a friend of ours, you might find that he's no longer a friend after 6 months or a year of building your product. It can kill friendships. But the right number of partners is really around that 3 number. Because everybody can't push the ball at one time. You're going to find that you have a baby, you have sickness in the family, something's going to happen where you're going to need somebody else to push the cart for a while and push that ball up the mountain, and then they're going to fall, and you're going to have to push for them for a while. So, and you need people that are better at things than you are. So you need, like in my case, I was better at product development, so I needed a finance guy, a sales guy, and so I kind of brought partners in to kind of fit those models. And then for all the companies since, we've done the same thing. Where I feel the most is when I bring in one partner, and it's just if things don't work out, then you're by yourself. Right. If things don't work out, the second question was, you need to have a really strong shareholder agreement going into this. Mm-hmm. So everybody knows going into it that if I'm not pushing my weight, pushing the weight, or if I want out, how can I get out?
It's like a prenup.
It's definitely prenups make a lot of sense here in this case. So you want it to be painful for the buyer in this case. So if I'm trying to get rid of a partner, it should be painful to me to get rid of a partner, so I can't do some funny business and get somebody at a discount. So typically you say, the value of the company is, I don't know, I'll make up a number, 3 times the earnings, for example. So you say, but the real value is closer to maybe 1 times the earnings of the top line. So you're making it twice as painful to buy that partner out. And if you're wanting to do that, then he's getting a good deal also at that same time.
That's true. That's true. So let's say that you did a startup, you've made it through some of the initial growing pains. What do some of the challenges look like for a company that's been around for, say, 9 years, that maybe they wouldn't have thought of early on? Maybe things started out great, and then now this is the problems they have.
There's really a few things. Like you're going to find that your employees get a little tired sometimes. They want something new at some point. I mean, think about the tech industry. To be at a company for 8 years is a long time.
It's a really long time.
You've been at Pragmatic Works for 6 years?
7.
7 years. I mean, that's a long time at a tech company, right? And eventually you get that little 7-year itch sometimes, right? Sure. That Devin's announcing his resignation today also. It's part of this video.
Starting a new company called Pragmatic Works.
The other thing is as you grow, is losing your soul. So, we've been around, we've about just south of about 100 employees right now, and we're seeing a little bit of an explosion right now, right? We're hiring a lot of new people, we're hiring some contractors in some cases. So that explosion, where you bring in a whole bunch of people, you might find your soul starts to change a little bit. Your culture starts to change. So you really need to make sure that you don't make compromises on the hires that you make, and that those people fit your culture, so they don't change your culture. You want to make sure they adapt versus having your company adapt to them. Otherwise, people start to leave for other reasons. Sure. Politics, you got to make sure that politics stays at a minimum. I think we do a pretty good job here, but it's inevitable, small company, big company, you're going to see a little bit of politics. And then just scaling, right? Another challenge is when you hit certain numbers, call it 5 million, 10 million, whatever that number is, each one of those is a little bit of a sheetrock ceiling, for example. You got to punch through, and not a glass ceiling, because you can't really see the other side of it. You have no idea what's on the other side, and it takes some big momentum to push you through that that ceiling. For us, right now, we hit a ceiling last year, and then our ceiling is we want to go local. So we're opening up local offices to try to punch through that. And our goal there is those local offices can become mini startups. And we're going to nurture them like a startup where they feel entrepreneurism, and then they can kind of grow and they can hit their own little mini ceilings, but do that times 5 versus doing that times 1.
So a couple follow-up questions to that, just so they know, and this isn't anything secretive, but where are some of the areas that we're looking to go local? I think
so this year we've launched, of course, Jacksonville, which is where we had an office anyways, but we've always had a national team. So when you look at Pragmatic Works, the business, we'd fly our consultants wherever the work was. We found that a lot of companies want us to be local. So of course, Jacksonville, we started hiring people local to do work locally. Minnesota, it's a big one, in New England. And then we are just hiring our frontline staff in Dallas right now also.
Great.
And then our goal is to open up 2 new cities a year. As time goes on, we've done this all self-funded also. So if you were to get investment funds, you might find you open up 10 cities in a year and all that, but you might make some really big mistakes with somebody else's money. When it's your money, you try to do things the right way.
Be a little bit more exploratory.
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned scaling here. Kind of a different form of scaling I would ask you about is going along with a startup. With a startup, usually you're doing a lot of the work. And this is the same case for you. You were doing a lot of the consulting work early on. Kind of a different form of scaling. How do you scale yourself once you reach a certain point where you need to be more focused on different areas of the business? Yeah,
so I think that for me, it's about finding key people, right? So you've interviewed Adam. He's a key person I put in the consulting side. His key person for training was you.
Right.
So then he can kind of step back and let you do 80% of that work, and he can just kind of step in when he needs it. I think, to me, it's important early on, especially for management and for everybody, to not feel like that, to not be able to not to ask Devin to do something that I haven't done myself. So I'm not going to send you on a road if I haven't been on the road myself and felt those pains.
Sure.
And I used to travel 75%. Now I'm down to like 30%, 20%. Right. But it's not fair for me to ask an employee to do that. It's not fair for me to ask an employee to go clean toilets if I haven't done that myself.
Right.
So we don't do that, of course. But you get the idea.
Yeah. So this question I thought of too that a lot of people have asked. I don't think it's a very interesting story, but it's good for people to know anyways. How did the name Pragmatic Works come?
So it was completely a domain name search.
Yeah.
I know I wanted to have works in the name, and I went through a whole slew of adjectives until I finally got a hit. Pragmatic, and then works. Okay, I'm like, I tried a whole bunch of, I tried hundreds of adjectives at 11 o'clock at night, and then I eventually hit Pragmatic Works, and the domain name was available, sold. And then that same night, I went to logomaker.com and came up with the logo. You see, the old
slightly
logo.
Slightly adapted, but pretty much.
You see on your screen right now. So for what some companies spend tens of thousands of dollars in name and branding searches, I did for $49 and a $10 domain name on GoDaddy. And several bottles of wine. So
maybe it's a little bit more interesting story than I gave it credit then. So this is another kind of good sort of a startup question here, but I think it really tailors to what you've done with Pragmatic Works, which is about reinvesting the income that you've got or the revenue that you've gotten. So taking the revenue that you've gotten over the year and reinvesting it back in the company, whether it's through hiring new resources or reinvesting in new product development. Do you have any kind of thoughts on at least a balance between reinvesting and kind of bringing in that revenue and showing the profitability of the company? What's kind of thoughts on that?
And that's the great thing about being self-funded is you don't have to worry about investors behind the scenes other than yourself.
Yeah.
So there's nobody looking over my shoulder to figure out. That's really good coffee.
It's bitter. Oh yes,
a little bitter. It's being self-funded. You kind of control your own destiny, which is good and bad. So for us, and there's certain advantages to making sure at the end of the year you can decide to pay Uncle Sam the money, or you can decide to pay the employees or reinvest the money and reinvest the money or. So in our case, we try to get as close to zero in profit as we can. Now that said, we're not a very attractive company because of that.
Yeah.
So if we already
customers.
We already customers. But if we ever wanted to get a new investor, for example, we would be very attractive.
Right.
So that's that balancing act. You have to know, well, in 3 years, I want to get maybe an investor so I can kind of start to grow a little bit, be a big boy.
Right.
And if that's the case, then you need to start leaning more towards showing profit. In our case, we lean towards investments like going local, for example. That means hiring new sales force locally, hiring more, getting kind of more resources locally, and that's not cheap. I made some interesting and bad choices in investments and good choices in investments, and if 1/3 of them hit, then that's a pretty darn good day.
And you see that across the company. So you see that with consulting and going local. You see that with software. You're constantly reinvesting in the software.
On the software side, we spent almost a year of almost our entire development staff working on Legitest, which is a testing platform for testing your data stuff. And that was a big bet. And we'll see if it works or not. But it was a big bet that led to a whole bunch of other things and innovations as well. If you don't invent in the software world in 18 months, you might as well pack it up. We could stop development right now and just milk the money, and we would see that it'd be great for 18 months, but in about 18 months, we'd be out of business.
And you see the same thing with training. We're investing in an on-demand training platform so that we kind of have, through all three phases of our company, a lot of reinvestment.
Yeah, and if you look at that, also in the startup phase, when I first started Pragmatic Works, it was 2008. It was the worst possible time to do a startup company.
Yeah.
And I came from the in-person training, right? You spend, back in the good old days, right? You spend $3,000, you go to Orlando, go to Vegas, and you get a class, and everybody, you kind of go get a class when you're not at the gambling tables probably. But that's the world that when I started Pragmatic Works, the world that just ended. And so that part of that reinvestment is now we go into virtual training and say, all right, well, the class is going to cost you, $3,000. You can do it at your desk for $595 or $695. And then after a while, people didn't want that anymore. They wanted to do training on their schedule. So now we got to do on demand. So it's constantly reinventing yourself in the training case about every 2 or 3 years, platform wise.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense. All right, so I have a couple more personal questions here for you. Those are actually very interesting. So good startup kind of information here. I'll start out easy for you, and then I'll get more difficult. We'll say.
Pisces.
Favorite sports team?
Oh, that's an easy one. Jacksonville Jaguars.
Okay, I told you
that's an easy one. Yeah. It's not easy to be a fan of Jacksonville Jaguars, but
it's pretty sad. But
but I'm not a bandwagon fan though either. So.
No one could ever claim any Jaguars fan is a bandwagon.
No.
What's your favorite part of the world to visit?
Gosh, I just came back from Napa, and that was a really cool part of the world. But I think for me, I like Norway a lot in the summertime.
Yeah.
And in summertime, it's just so beautiful, and the people are awesome, and we had a customer I used to go to there, and they're such good people.
Yeah. So here's a more difficult one. What's your favorite part about being my brother?
The fact that you still have to get a booster seat to eat good dinner. And right now he's on a booster seat, guys. He's in a high chair.
I am sitting on a very thick book, a SQL Server 2005 book.
Yeah, they still have some purpose. Yeah, end of life for 2005, that's what it means. You are relegated to Devin sitting on you. I would think you're one of my best friends. That's nice.
I like that.
And you created some good kids, and you got to have a booster seat. That's pretty cool.
I was telling the story at lunch. We had a new hire today. We took him out to lunch. I was telling him about the story of. He's drinking the fake coffee here again. The story about us going to, what are they called, Lumineers or whatever you.
Oh yeah, the Luminaries.
Tell about that.
All right, so I was 17 years old. I think I was in my later years at home, and Devin would have been probably like 9 or 10, probably at that point. We're about 7 or 8 years apart. Anyways, we're in South United States, probably other places in the world also. You make these luminaries at Christmas time. You put out at their bags of dirt, and you put candles in them. And on Christmas Eve, you light them, and it's lighting the path to your house for all the religious reasons and all that. Anyways, so we were going to this little pond. We're getting all these luminaries, and we're scooping, and all of a sudden we hear this hissing sound. And these cattails on the lake start to be batted back and forth. Anyways, it was a really large alligator. And I look around, I'm kind of petrified. I look around, and Devin is already running like 30 feet behind me. And
in front of you, I was like...
Opposite direction, yes. And so I eventually hauled butt also. But it proved that you don't have to be the fastest, you have to be the smart, you just have to be next to the fastest guy. But I had this whole stream of time, so I've had bad luck with Devin and animals. We found snakes together, and large snakes and alligators and all sorts of stuff like that we've found over the years. But
welcome to Florida.
Don't do a nature trail with Devin.
All right, so this last question you're not really allowed to answer, but I'm going to ask you anyways because I'm sure you'll take it a funny way. and hopefully they'll never watch this. But which one of your 4 children is your favorite?
Wow. Yeah, that will not be answered.
No. Y'all know it's Camille. All right, no. Just kidding. Well, Brian, thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
I appreciate you doing the interview.
Thanks for getting me in trouble.
No, hopefully you guys find this interesting. Actually, I found it really interesting to hear about your perspective on startups. We'll probably do another one as well to follow up on some other things that's going on with Pragmatic Works. Hope you guys enjoyed this Who Is series again today with Brian Knight. Again, my name's Devin Knight, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.